Imagine waking up one morning and the sky above your city is filled with smoke. Soldiers are fighting in the streets. Neighbors sprint for safety. Communications cut. Power gone. This isn't a scene from a movie. This is Sudan, right now. One of the largest countries in Africa. Collapsing into one of the world's worst wars that has been ignored until recently. In the next few minutes, we'll cover three things. 1. A very brief history of Sudan and the early North-South wars that eventually led to South Sudan. 2. The story of the current war that began in April 2023, the players, the timeline, and outside backers. 3. A focused look at the religious and ethnic dynamics, the politics of identity and what this war means for millions of people caught in the middle. Sudan occupies the large swath of land just south of Egypt, a crossroads of Arab, African, and Nilotic influences. It is a land where ancient kingdoms thrived from Kush, Nubia, medieval Christian kingdoms, and centuries of Islamic rule. A place where identities overlap, intertwine, and sometimes collide. When Sudan became independent in 1956, it inherited borders drawn by empires. Lines that forced dozens of peoples into one state but gave power mostly to elites in the north. The result? Sudan entered independence already on the brink of war. The First Sudanese Civil War began even before independence in 1955 and ended in 1972. It was a bitter conflict between the North, the central government, and the South, who sought greater autonomy. The southern populations, Christian, animist, and ethnically distinct, feared domination by the primarily Arab, Muslim North. For nearly 17 years, Sudan fought itself. Villages burned. Generations lost. That war ended with the Addis Ababa Agreement but left many grievances unresolved. A second, even bloodier war began in 1983 and only ended with the 2005 Comprehensive Peace Agreement. That process set the stage for the 2011 independence of South Sudan. Fast forward, after decades of authoritarian rule under Omar al-Bashir, a popular uprising in 2018 to 2019 toppled him. But the transition to civilian rule stalled. Real power increasingly sat with two military actors who had been allies at the top of Sudan's post-Bashir order, the Sudanese Armed Forces, SAF, led by General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, and the Rapid Support Forces, RSF, a powerful paramilitary force, born from the Janjaweed militias of the Darfur conflict, and commanded by Mohamed Hamdan Dagalo. Two generals, one country. And neither willing to step down. Tensions over how and whether to merge the RSF into a professional army became explosive. On April 15, 2023, fighting erupted in Khartoum and quickly spread. What began as clashes between two security forces turned into a full-scale civil war that fractured the country. Khartoum, a city of 5 million people, became a war zone. The Sudanese Armed Forces bombed RSF positions across the city. The RSF seized airports, neighborhoods and bridges. Within hours, the capital was carved into checkpoints and battle lines. From the first months of the war, it became one of the world's worst humanitarian crises. Millions have been displaced, both internally and as refugees, while tens of thousands have been killed. Aid agencies describe whole cities emptied of civilians, hospitals attacked, and humanitarian corridors blocked. The war has been fought in several theaters: Khartoum and its twin cities, Darfur in the west, Omdurman, the strategic Red Sea port of Port Sudan, and parts of eastern Sudan. Control of ports, airfields and supply lines has been decisive in shaping who holds territory at different moments. Outside powers have been implicated, sometimes indirectly, through arms flows, political backing or mediation efforts. Regional players like the UAE, Egypt, Saudi Arabia and neighbors such as Chad and South Sudan have had stakes, and accusations have flown about weapons deliveries and proxy support. Egypt, Iran, Saudi Arabia and Turkey back the Sudanese Armed Forces, while UAE has been cited as the major foreign backer of RSF, supplying weapons, funding, logistics, facilitating trade/port access and allegedly helping recruit mercenaries. Russia has also gotten involved in the conflict. It has provided arms and military advice, mainly to the RSF, through groups like the Wagner Group, in exchange for access to gold. The RSF's leader even visited Moscow following Russia's invasion of Ukraine in 2022. Recently, Russia's attitude towards the paramilitary group has changed. According to reports, since mid-2024 Russia has increasingly favored the national military, Sudanese Armed Forces, SAF, over the paramilitary force. The shift is likely linked to a strategic interest. Russia has been negotiating to establish a naval/military logistical and technical base in Port Sudan, on the Red Sea. This external dimension complicates any peace push. It's tempting to reduce Sudan's violence to a simple Muslim versus Christian or Arab versus African story. The truth is messier. Identity rivalries matter deeply in Sudan, but they overlap with political power, resource competition and historical grievances. This war is not a religious war. Both the SAF and RSF are overwhelmingly Muslim. Sudan's rulers have used Islam at different times to consolidate power, rally support, or marginalize opponents. In this war, religion is the background music, not the conductor. But ethnic identity, that part is explosive. Ethnic lines and regions. Darfur, West. This is the home to non-Arab ethnic groups such as the Fur, Zaghawa and Masalit, groups that were the main recruits of rebel camps in the 2000s. Government then mobilized Arabized militias, Janjaweed, against them, a dynamic that created ethnicized violence and mass displacement. Those same wounds still shape how communities view the RSF, given its Janjaweed lineage. The Nuba Mountains and Blue Nile, diverse, with African Nilotic and other groups who have long resisted Khartoum's control. The South, now South Sudan, historically majority Christian and animist. The South's decades of rebellion against northern rule were less about theology and more about marginalization, resource control, and political exclusion, which is why the North-South wars had a different character. Ethnicization is a process, when militias recruit along tribal lines, when attacks deliberately target civilian communities because of their identity, or when leaders exploit fear. That's how politics turns into identity violence. Darfur is the clearest example of how local disputes, climate pressure and political exclusion exploded into ethnicized conflict, a pattern that feeds into how civilians experience the 2023 war. The RSF and its allied militias have been accused by human rights organizations and the United Nations of conducting systematic ethnic cleansing and potential genocide targeting non-Arab communities. The violence specifically targets non-Arab ethnic groups such as the Masalit and Fur. Survivors report that people with darker skin are subjected to racial insults and violence, while those with lighter skin may be allowed to flee. RSF fighters have reportedly gone door-to-door, executing people based on their ethnicity. The current violence is described by analysts and victims as a continuation of the same campaign, involving the same perpetrators, victim groups, and methods of dehumanization. In West Darfur alone, a UN panel of experts indicated that between 10,000 and 15,000 people were killed in 2023 due to ethnically motivated violence. The fall of the city of al-Bashir in late 2025 to the RSF has been a focal point of the crisis, with reports of mass killings in hospitals and of fleeing civilians. Reports from the Sudan Doctors Network and analysis from the Yale Humanitarian Research Lab documented mass killings, with satellite imagery showing evidence consistent with human bodies and blood. The situation is being investigated by the International Criminal Court for War Crimes, and international bodies have warned of prevailing signs of genocide. The international response has been widely criticized as insufficient to stop the ongoing atrocities. More than 150,000 people have died in the conflict across the country, and about 12 million have fled their homes in what the United Nations has called the world's largest humanitarian crisis. Between December 2024 and May 2025, more than 24 million people in Sudan faced acute food insecurity. Over 635,000 people, including in the country's largest camp for displaced people, are experiencing famine conditions and a heightened risk of death. More people are living in famine conditions in Sudan than the rest of the world combined. This crisis is entirely man-made, explains IRC Country Director for Sudan, Itaz Yusuf. The ongoing conflict has decimated livelihoods, displaced millions, and blocked life-saving aid from reaching those in desperate need. The war has also devastated the country's public infrastructure, including its health system. More than 70% of Sudan's hospitals have been destroyed, leaving millions without access to essential medical care as disease outbreaks surge. With healthcare access severely limited, a cholera outbreak has spread across Sudan, resulting in more than 120,000 confirmed cases and over 3,000 deaths. The collapse of critical healthcare services has put new mothers at risk of losing their lives in the months ahead, as it has become nearly impossible to access essential reproductive care. The ongoing crisis in Sudan is taking a devastating toll on women and girls. Gender-based violence is escalating. Reports of intimate partner violence, sexual exploitation, abuse and trafficking are widespread, while survivors struggle to access support. Economic hardship has stripped countless women of their livelihoods, forcing many into desperate and exploitative situations, and increasing their vulnerability. In Darfur, alarming reports of sexual violence underscore the immense suffering endured by those in dire conditions, revealing the exceptional vulnerability of women and children. Urgent action is needed to address these atrocities and provide support to those affected. These acts are the subject of sanctions, investigations and, in some cases, accusations of crimes under international law. But, accountability will be a long, difficult road. The longer this war goes on, the more Sudan risks fragmentation, into warlord zones, regional states, or shifting alliances. Some towns have already formed local civil administrations because the national government barely exists. And that might be the most haunting part: the collapse isn't coming. It's already here. What would it take to end this? Peace won't come from a single handshake. It would take a real ceasefire. International pressure on all armed groups. Humanitarian corridors. Local agreements in every region. And long-term inclusion of Sudan's neglected communities. Without justice for past atrocities, any peace will be temporary. How you can responsibly follow and help. If you want to follow the crisis, rely on reputable outlets, UN and humanitarian agencies' briefings, and NGOs on the ground. If you want to help, donate to established relief organizations working in Sudan and neighboring countries, links in the description. Here's the truth: Sudan isn't doomed because of its diversity. It's suffering because generation after generation of leaders chose power over people. But the Sudanese people, the ones who marched in 2019, deserve a country that reflects all of them, not just whoever holds the guns. Thanks for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe. This story needs to be told. Comment below if you want a part 2 on the Darfur conflict, the Janjaweed, or the 2019 revolution.